My name is Freya Collins. I'm 36 years old, and if you had asked me a month ago what the most important thing in my life was, I wouldn't have said happiness. I wouldn't have said love. I would have said stability. The kind you build quietly, carefully. The kind that doesn't need attention to exist, but somehow holds everything together when life tries to pull it apart. I thought I had that. I thought I understood exactly where the lines were in my life, what belonged to me, what belonged to my son Oliver, and what belonged to the complicated, sometimes exhausting family that came with being their daughter. I was wrong. The moment everything shifted didn't come with shouting or slammed doors or dramatic accusations. It came in the quietest way possible. Oliver walked through the front door that afternoon like it was any other day. His backpack slid off one shoulder, his sneakers squeaking faintly against the hardwood floor. He didn't look upset. He didn't look confused. He walked straight up to me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and pressed his face into my side the way he always did when he wanted comfort without asking for it. And then he said, very softly, like he was telling me something completely ordinary, "They went to a restaurant. I waited in the car for 2 hours." That was it. No tears, no anger, no dramatics. Just a statement. I remember standing there in the kitchen, my hand still resting on the counter, feeling like the air had shifted in a way I couldn't quite understand yet. My fingers started to tremble. Not violently, not enough for anyone else to notice. Just enough for me to realize something inside me had already started breaking. I didn't ask him anything. Not yet. Because there are some things a child should never have to explain to you. Some things that, if they're true, don't need clarification. I told him to go sit on the couch, to turn on his cartoons, to relax. My voice sounded normal. That was the part I remember most. How normal I sounded. Then I grabbed my keys. 10 minutes later, I was standing in the entryway of the house I had bought for my parents 3 years ago. The house I paid for. The house I maintained. The house I handed over without ever asking for anything in return. They were exactly where I expected them to be. My mother was folding laundry on the couch, carefully stacking towels like it was just another quiet afternoon. My father sat beside her, a glass of iced tea in his hand, the television playing something neither of them seemed to care about. They didn't even look surprised to see me. Didn't ask why I was there. Didn't ask where Oliver was. That should have been my first real answer. I didn't sit down. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at them and said, "You have 24 hours to pack your things. You're leaving this house." My mother froze. Her hand stopped mid-fold, a towel slipping from her fingers. My father looked at me like I had just spoken in a language he didn't understand. So I repeated it. Slowly. Clearly. "You have 24 hours. He laughed. Actually laughed. Like this was a misunderstanding. Like this was a joke that would resolve itself if he just waited long enough. My mother didn't laugh. She looked nervous. For the first time in years, I asked them one question. "Did you leave Oliver in the car?" There was a pause. A small one. But it was enough. Because they didn't deny it. My mother was the first to speak. She said he didn't want to come inside. That he had been fussy. That he'd been a bit much lately. That it seemed easier to let him sit in the car for a little while. My father added that it wasn't that long. That they checked on him halfway through. Halfway through. Like that made it better. Like that turned 2 hours into something acceptable. That's when I found out the rest. They had gone to lunch with my sister. Her 2 children. A reservation for 5. 5 seats at a table. None of them for my son. They didn't forget him. They excluded him. On purpose. My mother said he was difficult. That my sister's children were easier, better behaved, more pleasant to be around. I stopped listening after that. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about what happened that afternoon. This was about every quiet moment I had ignored over the years. Every time my sister was prioritized. Every time her mistakes were excused. Every time I was told I didn't need help because I was strong enough. I had believed that narrative. I had accepted it. I paid their bills. I fixed their problems. I bought this house. And I never asked for anything back. But this wasn't favoritism anymore. This was cruelty. You don't leave a child alone in a car. You don't isolate an 8-year-old because he doesn't fit neatly into your expectations. You don't discard him because he's not convenient. I told them again. 24 hours. My mother tried to argue. Said I was overreacting. Said he was fine. My father leaned back, completely unfazed, and said, "Maybe next time you should teach your son how to behave if you want him included." That was the moment something inside me went completely still. Not louder. Not angrier. Just still. Because I realized I didn't recognize them anymore. Not as my parents. Not as people I trusted around my child. I turned around and walked out. I didn't say anything else. Didn't argue. Didn't explain. I drove home. Oliver was exactly where I left him. Curled up on the couch, watching cartoons like the world hadn't shifted under his feet that afternoon. He looked up at me when I walked in. Didn't ask anything. Didn't mention it again. And I didn't bring it up either. Not yet. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. They were never going to be alone with him again. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought drawing that line would be enough. I was wrong. Because that was only the first crack. And what came next was everything I hadn't seen clearly until now. The next morning, my phone rang before I had even finished pouring my coffee. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. But I did anyway. Clara. My younger sister. Of course it was her. Not my parents. Not a message asking how Oliver was. Not even a weak attempt at explaining what had happened. No, it was Clara. I let it ring twice before answering, already bracing myself for the tone I knew was coming. She didn't say hello. Didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask about Oliver. She went straight in. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" There it was. Not concern. Not confusion. Accusation. I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching Oliver in the living room, still half asleep, still wrapped in the quiet innocence that made everything feel sharper. "I'm handling something that doesn't involve you," I said, keeping my voice even. She scoffed. "Oh, it involves me when you're threatening to throw Mom and Dad out of their own house over a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. That word again. Like it could smooth over something that ugly. I didn't ask how she found out. I already knew. My mother had called her the night before. Crying, no doubt. Carefully reshaping the story the way she always did. Removing the parts that made her look bad, exaggerating the parts that made her look like the victim. In their version, I had probably stormed in, screaming, overreacting, threatening to make them homeless over something small. They would have left out the part where they left an 8-year-old alone in a car. "I'm not discussing this with you," I said quietly. "Of course you're not," she snapped, "because you know you're wrong. You've always had this superiority thing, Freya. Like, because you've got your life together, you get to judge everyone else. I closed my eyes for a second. Not because what she said hurt, but because it didn't surprise me anymore. "I'm hanging up now," I said. "Don't you dare!" I ended the call. Just like that. No argument. No explanation. No energy wasted. For a moment, the kitchen was silent again. Too quiet. But it wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. This one felt final. That afternoon, I made it official. Not emotionally. Legally. I called a lawyer. Explained the situation in simple, factual terms. Ownership of the house. Private agreement. No formal transfer of title. He didn't need much more than that. By the time I hung up, paperwork was already being drafted. A termination of occupancy notice. Effective immediately. I printed it out myself. Held the pages in my hands for a moment longer than necessary. Not because I was hesitating, but because I was acknowledging what this meant. There was no going back from this. Then I got in my car and drove over. I didn't go inside this time. I didn't need to. I walked up to the mailbox, slid the envelope inside, and took a photo. Proof. Documentation. Control. Then I sent a message to my father. "Check your mail." It didn't take long. Within an hour, my phone started lighting up. First, my mother. Message after message. Screenshots of old receipts. Groceries they had paid for when I was 22. A rent payment they had covered once after I graduated. Like she was presenting evidence in a trial that had never existed. Like motherhood was something you could bill your child for decades later. Then, my father. Shorter messages. Sharper. "You're tearing this family apart. All over a dinner. You've lost perspective." I read every message. Didn't reply to a single one. Because something had shifted in me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the explosive, reactive way they expected. I was focused. Cold, even. Because this wasn't just about the restaurant. That was just the moment it became impossible to ignore. This had been building for years. The way Clara was always protected. Always excused. Her failed boutique that they had funded with the money from selling their old house. The jobs she left after a few months because they were too stressful. The relationships that ended in chaos, somehow never her fault. And through all of it, they stood behind her like she could do no wrong. While I built my life from the ground up. Raised my son alone after his father walked away without a second thought. Paid my bills. Took care of them when they needed it. And somehow, I became the one they didn't need to worry about. The one who could handle everything. Including being overlooked. But not anymore. 24 hours passed. And they didn't leave. So I went back. This time, the house felt different the moment I stepped inside. Heavier. Like something had settled into the walls overnight. There were boxes now. Half-packed. Tape hanging loose. My father sat on the edge of the couch, his posture stiff, like he had been waiting. My mother was in the kitchen, moving things around without purpose, pretending not to hear me come in. I didn't waste time. "Do you understand why this is happening?" I asked. My voice was calm. Controlled. My father didn't hesitate. "Your son brings this on himself." The words landed harder than anything else they had said. "He acts out. He doesn't listen. We weren't going to reward that kind of behavior." That was it. No doubt. No regret. No second thought. Just justification. I nodded slowly. Not because I agreed, but because I finally understood. There was nothing left to fix here. Nothing left to explain. "You have until the end of the day," I said. "After that, I'm changing the locks." My mother turned then, her voice sharper. "You wouldn't actually do that." I held her gaze. "You'll find out." And then I left. Again. That night, I didn't get any calls. No messages. But something else appeared instead. A post. My mother's Facebook. Vague, of course. Carefully worded. Some children forget the sacrifices their parents made. Disrespect is the real pandemic these days. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was hurt, but because it confirmed something I hadn't fully accepted until that moment. They weren't sorry. They weren't confused. They were resentful. That they had been confronted. That they had been forced to face consequences. I didn't comment. Didn't react. But a few hours later, a message came through from one of my cousins. "Hey, is this about Oliver?" That was when it clicked. They weren't just rewriting the story. They were shifting the blame. Onto a child. Onto my son. I set my phone down. Walked into the living room. Watched Oliver for a moment as he focused on building something out of blocks, completely unaware of the narrative being built around him. And in that moment, any lingering doubt disappeared. The next evening, I drove back to the house. This time, I didn't come alone. A locksmith pulled up behind me. My parents' car was already packed. Boxes stacked in the trunk. Plastic bags shoved into the back seat. They had packed, but they hadn't believed me. Not fully. Not until they saw me walking toward the door. My father stepped forward immediately, his voice rising. "Freya, don't do this." I didn't answer. Didn't engage. I just looked at the locksmith and nodded. It took 5 minutes. 5 minutes to change the locks. 5 minutes to make it clear that this wasn't a threat. It was done. When the locksmith left, my father followed me to my car, still talking, still trying to pull me back into something I had already stepped out of. "You're letting a child ruin this family," he said. "You're punishing us over parenting decisions." I turned to him then, really looked at him, and asked one question. "Would you have left Clara's kids in the car for 2 hours?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew. That night, they checked into a motel. I know because my mother texted me the address. Said they hoped I was happy. Said maybe one day I could explain to Oliver why his grandparents were on the street. Like he was the reason. Like he had done something wrong. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat down next to my son. And for the first time, I asked him to tell me everything. Every detail. From the moment they picked him up, to the moment they brought him home. And what he told me? It changed something inside me in a way I didn't expect. Oliver sat cross-legged on the couch, his fingers absent-mindedly peeling at the edge of a cracker he hadn't finished. He didn't look scared. That was the part that stayed with me. He didn't look like something terrible had happened to him. He looked like he had adjusted to it. Like he had already decided it wasn't worth making a big deal about. And that hurt more than anything else. "Can you tell me what happened?" I asked gently, keeping my voice soft, careful not to lead him. He nodded. "They picked me up from school," he said. "Grandma said we were going somewhere special." There was a small pause, like he was replaying it in his head. I thought maybe the park or a movie. His eyes flicked up to mine for a second, then back down to his hands. I was excited. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't interrupt. "They drove to a restaurant," he continued. "A nice one. I saw people inside. Everyone was dressed up. He swallowed. I tried to open the door, but Grandpa said to stay in the car. My hands curled into my palms. What did he say exactly? I asked. That it wouldn't take long, Oliver said. That this wasn't for me. Not for me. He said it so plainly, like it was just information. I asked if I could come in, he added quietly. But he said I was being difficult earlier, so I should stay and calm down. I closed my eyes for a second. Just a second. Then what happened? They went inside, he said. I watched them go through the doors. His voice didn't shake. It didn't break. I thought they'd come back soon. He paused again, thinking. I waited. I ate the crackers from my bag. I watched the door. His fingers tightened slightly. I kept thinking maybe they'd come out. The simplicity of it, the waiting, the hoping, pressed down on me in a way that made it hard to breathe. Did anyone check on you? I asked. He nodded. Grandma came out once, he said. She opened the door and asked if I was okay. And what did you say? I said I was hungry. The words landed like something heavy and sharp all at once. And what did she do? He hesitated this time, then shrugged. She said they'd be done soon. Of course she did. I forced my voice to stay steady. Did they bring you anything? Food? Water? He shook his head. No. I looked away for a moment, pressing my lips together, willing myself to stay calm. And then? I got tired, he said. I think I fell asleep for a little bit. His voice softened. When they came back, Grandpa told me to buckle up. And then? They said to tell you I didn't want to go inside, that I was tired. There it was. The lie. Planned. Simple. Clean. Like none of this had mattered. Like it could all be erased with one sentence. I felt something inside me shift again. Not sharper this time, not louder, but deeper. Colder. Why didn't you say that? I asked gently. He looked at me then, really looked at me. Because it wasn't true. I reached out and pulled him into me, holding him tighter than I usually did, my hand resting against the back of his head. He leaned into me easily, like this was the most natural thing in the world. And in that moment, I made a quiet promise to myself. No one would ever make him feel like that again. Not while I had anything to say about it. I thought that was the end of it. That drawing the line, removing them from our lives, would be enough to close that chapter. But 3 days later, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something made me answer. Hello? Is this Freya Collins? A woman's voice. Professional. Calm. Yes. This is St. Andrew's Hospital. We have your father here. He's been in a car accident. For a second, everything went completely still. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just quiet. Like my mind had stepped back to process the information before deciding what to do with it. He sustained significant injuries to his leg, she continued. He's conscious, but he'll need surgery. You're listed as his emergency contact. We need consent to proceed. I blinked. Once. Twice. How am I still listed? I asked before I could stop myself. I can't speak to that, she said. But without authorization, there may be delays. Delays. Court approval. Time. Time he might not have. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat there for a moment, staring at nothing. A few seconds later, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother. I answered. Her voice was different, shaking. Not controlled. Not rehearsed. He needs surgery, she said immediately. They won't do it without consent. You're still on the paperwork. I don't know why, but you are. Freya, please. Please. That word felt unfamiliar coming from her. Not because she had never said it before, but because she had never meant it like this. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just said, I'm on my way. The hospital was cold. Too bright. Too clean. My mother was sitting in the waiting area when I arrived, her hands clasped tightly together, her eyes fixed on the floor, like she didn't trust herself to look up. She looked smaller. That was the first thing I noticed. Not physically, but something about her presence. Like part of her certainty had been stripped away. She looked up when she heard my footsteps. For a second, she looked like she might say something.
Apologize. Explain.
But she didn't. I didn't give her the chance. I walked past her, straight to the nurse's station. Freya Collins, I said. I'm listed as emergency contact for Daniel Collins. The nurse checked the system. Nodded. Yes, you are. She handed me the forms. I didn't read them in detail. I didn't need to. I signed where they told me to sign. Initialed where they told me to initial. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes to make sure he would get the surgery he needed. When I walked back to the waiting area, my mother was crying quietly. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly. She looked up at me, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you come? It wasn't accusatory. It wasn't defensive. It was confused. Why didn't you just ignore the call? She asked. After everything. I stood there for a moment, considering my answer. Then I told her the truth. Because my son is watching. She frowned slightly, like she didn't understand. I told him I had to go out, I continued. He asked where. I said the hospital. I paused. And one day, he's going to ask why. Her eyes filled again. And I want him to know who we are, I said. Not who you were. Silence settled between us. Heavy. But not hostile. We don't abandon people, I added quietly. We don't turn our backs when someone's hurt, even if they deserve it. She didn't respond, just nodded. While my father was in surgery, we sat there together. 2 hours. No conversation. No explanations. And not once. Not once. Did she ask about Oliver? That told me everything I needed to know. Later that night, after I got home, my phone buzzed again. Clara. 2 words. You're pathetic. I stared at the message for a second, then locked my phone. She hadn't visited him, hadn't called, hadn't asked how he was. But she had time to judge me. The next day, I went back to the hospital. My father was awake this time.
Groggy. Pale.
Weaker than I had ever seen him. For a moment, I considered turning around. Leaving. But I didn't. I stepped inside. He looked at me. Really looked at me. And for once, he didn't have anything to say. No defense. No argument. No justification. So I spoke first. I'm not angry anymore, I said. My voice was calm. Even. That doesn't mean I forgive you. I let that sit for a second. It just means I'm not going to waste any more energy being hurt by you. His eyes didn't leave mine. You have a choice now, I continued. You can keep blaming an 8-year-old for not being convenient enough. My jaw tightened slightly. Or you can start becoming someone he might actually want to know someday. He didn't respond, but something in his expression shifted.
Subtle.
Small. But there. When I left, I stopped at the billing desk, asked for the remaining balance not covered by insurance, and I paid it.
Quietly.
No announcement. No message. No expectation. When I got home, Oliver was already asleep. I sat on the edge of his bed, watching him for a moment, his breathing steady, his face peaceful. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. But I knew better than to think it was over. Because stories like this, they don't end that easily. A week after the surgery, the hospital discharged my father. I didn't go. I didn't ask when he was leaving, didn't offer to pick him up, didn't check if they had a plan. That part wasn't mine to carry anymore. My mother found a way. She always did. Later that afternoon, she texted me an address. A small apartment across town. 1 bedroom. No extra details. No invitation. Just information. I didn't reply. And for the first time in what felt like years, things went quiet. No calls. No accusations. No carefully worded posts meant to draw sympathy from distant relatives. Just silence. It wasn't comfortable, but it was honest. And honestly, that felt new. Days passed. Then another week. Life settled into something steadier again. Oliver went to school. I went to work. We fell back into our routines, the kind that don't draw attention, but quietly rebuild something underneath. I thought maybe that was it. That distance had done what confrontation couldn't. Then, 2 weeks later, something shifted. It was a normal afternoon. I had just finished paying for groceries, balancing the bags in one hand while Oliver walked beside me, talking about something that had happened at school. I don't even remember what he was saying, because the moment we stepped outside, I saw them. My parents, standing near the sliding doors like they had been waiting. My first instinct was immediate. Turn around. Walk away. Protect him. Protect us. But I didn't get the chance. Oliver saw them first. His face lit up in a way that caught me completely off guard. He waved. Just like that. No hesitation. No resentment. No memory of sitting alone in a car for 2 hours. Because that's what children do. They forgive before they understand. They offer second chances before anyone earns them. My parents waved back.
Tentatively. Carefully.
And then Oliver looked up at me. "Can they come over now?" he asked. "I think maybe they miss me." The words landed somewhere deep. Not because they were complicated, but because they weren't. He wasn't asking for them. Not really. He was trying to make sense of something he didn't fully understand yet. Trying to fix something that wasn't his responsibility to fix. I didn't answer right away. I adjusted the grocery bags in my hand instead. "We have ice cream in the car," I said gently. "Let's not let it melt. We'll talk later." He nodded. Accepted it. Just like that. That night, after he went to bed, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Thinking. About everything. About what they had done. About how easily they had dismissed him. About the years of imbalance I had ignored. and about what it meant now, that he was willing to open the door again. Not for them, for him. Because this wasn't about whether they deserved another chance. It was about whether he deserved the opportunity to have grandparents, if they could become better than what they had been. The next morning, I sent one message. If you want to see him, you come here, and you earn it. They didn't reply immediately, but 3 days later, they showed up. No gifts, no excuses, no rehearsed speeches. My father walked slowly, leaning on a cane, each step measured, like he was still learning how to move in a body that no longer felt the same. My mother kept her eyes down as they approached the door, her hands clasped together like she didn't trust them to stay still. Oliver opened the door before I could. "Hi," he said brightly, like nothing had ever happened. Like they hadn't broken something important. I stood back, watched,
Observed.
the way my father looked at him, really looked at him. Not the tight-lipped tolerance I had seen so many times before. Not the quiet judgment hidden behind polite smiles. This time, there was something else. Something softer. "Hey, Oliver," he said, his voice quieter than usual.
Gentler.
They talked about school, about a project Oliver was working on, about things that should have always been easy, but somehow never were before. They stayed less than an hour. When they left, my mother finally looked up at me, just for a second, didn't speak. But something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not understanding, just acknowledgement. After they were gone, Oliver smiled for the rest of the day. He didn't know it had been a test. Didn't know I had been watching every word, every glance, every hesitation. But something had changed. Not completely. Not enough. But something. Weeks passed. They didn't push. Didn't show up unannounced. Didn't demand anything. They called once, just to say hello. My mother kept it brief. My father asked if Oliver wanted to get a burger sometime. Just the two of them. I said no. Not yet. And for the first time in my life, they didn't argue. They didn't push back. They didn't try to convince me I was wrong. They just said, "Okay." That was when I knew. Something had shifted. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, it was my cousin, Emily. Her voice sounded confused, almost amused. "Freya," she said, "have you heard what happened with Clara?" I hadn't. And what she told me? I almost didn't believe. Apparently, Clara had tried to go back to our parents, after finding out they weren't helping her anymore. She expected them to move in, help with rent, babysit her kids like they always had. But this time, they said no. Flat out. No hesitation. No compromise. She exploded. Accused them of choosing the wrong daughter, of abandoning her, of betrayal. Then she left, and hadn't spoken to them since. I sat there for a long time after that call, trying to piece it together, trying to understand if it was real, or just another temporary fracture. But a week later, my father called me, asked if he could come by. We sat at the kitchen table, same place where so many quiet realizations had settled over the past few weeks. Oliver was in the next room, building something out of Legos. My father didn't start with an apology. Not exactly. He didn't cry. Didn't reach for anything dramatic. He just sat there and spoke. "I didn't see it before," he said. "Not clearly." His voice was steady, but different. Not the way we treated you, or Oliver. He paused. Or how much we excused Clara. I didn't interrupt. Didn't help him find the words. He had to get there on his own. We thought you didn't need us, he continued. That you were fine. A small, bitter truth. And we used that as an excuse. He looked at me then. Directly. For everything. Silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable. Just real. Then he said something I never expected to hear. You were the one who showed up when it mattered. A pause. Not her. Another pause. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see that. He didn't try to hug me. Didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't expect anything in return. He just owned it. And somehow, that meant more than any apology ever could have. Since then, things have been careful, measured. They've seen Oliver a few more times. At the park, at an ice cream shop. Always with me there. Always controlled. I watch everything. Every word. Every look. Every moment. Because I don't forget. I don't erase what happened. I don't pretend it didn't matter. But I also see Oliver. The way he laughs when they're around now. The way he asks when he'll see them again. So I let it continue. Slowly. One step at a time. Not because they deserve it, but because he does. We're not healed. We're not whole. But for the first time in a long time, we're honest. And that's more than we've ever been.